Hello, welcome to the heavens and the earth. Thank you for joining us today. Today I want to talk about the new Pope Leo's comments on abortion and homosexual so-called marriage, and also the deportation of immigrants. So this talk is going to be pretty short, but let's take a look at a clip here and see what the Pope has said.
Pope Leo XIV was inaugurated with a ceremony in Rome over the weekend, which saw global leaders come together to mark the momentous occasion. The appointment of Pope Leo XIV sees a return to the Catholic Church's roots. The new Pope confirmed in a meeting with the Vatican diplomatic corps that the family is founded on the stable union between a man and a woman. This position is a far cry from the former Pope's blessing of LGBTQIA+ relationships, which is sending liberal Catholics into a tailspin.
I'm a little concerned about this choice for the LGBTQ plus community. In 2012, he gave an address to bishops, and he lamented the popular culture fostered and sympathy for beliefs and practices that are at odds with the gospel, and that's a quote. And then he cited the homosexual lifestyle and alternative families comprised of same-sex partners and their adopted children. I think that Pope Francis certainly made great changes in terms of embracing the LGBTQ plus community and extending blessings to the community. And I hope that this Pope doesn't roll back.
I'm gonna give him come to that in his time.
As well as being against gay marriage, Pope Leo reaffirmed the Church's stance on abortion, saying that the unborn and elderly enjoy dignity as God's creatures. Liberal online commentators blasted the Pope for his views, with this person saying, "I do think it's fairly tragic that the new Pope has regressive views on gender and sexuality, but I think all the people standing the cardinals forgot that the Catholic Church is an inherent institution. Pope Francis was sort of a fluke, and even he was far from perfect." But other commentators pointed out that Pope Leo is merely a return to normal programming for the Catholic Church. This person said, "Today, Pope Leo XIV reaffirmed two foundational Catholic truths. Marriage is between one man and one woman. Abortion is demonically evil." He also declared truth must be spoken even with blunt language. No ambiguity, no compromise, just clarity. And whilst Pope Leo XIV holds the conservative views of being against gay marriage and abortion, he has publicly criticised Donald Trump and J.D. Vance for their views on immigration and deportations.
Okay, so it's very simple talk here, not overly profound, but what the Pope is saying about marriage is good, and restoring the family unit as God intended with a man and a woman, one man, one woman, to form a union to bear children is good. And also his statements that abortion is wrong, that the unborn are precious as well as the living, is also good. It's a true statement as well. And I think what people will say who are opposed to these comments, I think their intentions are good. Maybe they're not being entirely honest, maybe not from ill will, maybe from fear of looking at the full picture, at the truth here. But love is love. This is true. But in the union of a man and woman, which is proper, that love is only amplified by having a child. So when a man and a woman love each other, a new child between them to share and strengthen their bond of love is all the greater. And homosexual couples have no way of experiencing that, which shows that the love that two men can experience, which they can, is not sexual, because they cannot produce a child together. The same thing of love between women. Women can love each other, but properly it's not a sexual union because no children can be born of that. So sex is not the definition of love between amongst men and amongst women. But sex is the culmination of love between a man and a woman, which produces a child, which in a truly loving union between that man and woman, that child is celebrated and welcomed. But, so that being said, let me talk about the Pope's comments about the deportation of immigrants, namely out of America, and some of the attacks against Trump and Vance. And whether you like those men or not is to me is beside the question. But I do think that deportation of immigrants out of America back to their home native countries is good. And the people that would protest that, again, I think those people are coming at it from a good-willed perspective, in that it is Christian behavior. I don't like the word duty, but it is Christian to take care of the poor. And so I understand people's desires to embrace these people, even though many of them are of a corrupt mindset because they come from corrupt, low-trust societies, and they're accustomed to that. And they're not accustomed to a Christian society where people trust each other. But I understand why people want to embrace them all the same, to provide for them, because they are destitute. They are poor and come from poor countries, and that's why they are coming here. However, you have to ask, why are their countries poor? So I recently, just this last year, I read a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. And this book is exactly what the title says. John Perkins worked for these large companies, these banks, and the American intel agencies to deliberately sabotage and undermine countries all over the world, but I'm talking about here countries in Latin America, Central and South America. So deliberately to undermine them, to undermine their economies, to exact their wealth. And the way he would do this is he would oftentimes go in there and evaluate the number of the population that they had, their country, what they were capable of producing, and then he would sell them infrastructure like an electrical dam, for example. But he would deliberately overestimate the economic stimulus that infrastructure would introduce into the country, knowing that once they paid for it, they would not have the production necessary to pay their bankers back for this loan, and then the banks would seize the property, and they'd be stuck paying these banks for the rest of time. And this was done methodically over and over again by men like this, and bankers in America, bankers in other countries. So these countries were driven into poverty, and these people have no hope. So the solution is not to empty all these countries of its people, because then who would cultivate those countries? They would just be wastelands filled with desperados. And then what, are the desperados just going to kill each other, and then you're just going to have wasteland and nothing? No, people have to live there and cultivate these lands. So if we're going to be Christians as Americans, which we are, we're of a very Christian temperament. Even people who don't espouse Christianity still hold to the Christian ideas of loving your neighbor and taking care of people. So, if we're going to help these people, a good way to help them would be to not extort them economically. And when I say that, extort them economically, you have to keep in mind your average American does not benefit from the economic exploitation of these nations. A few men, a few women at the top in these banks and these firms are the only ones who benefit from this, and everyone in the middle is just cut out of the equation. Both the people in Latin America and both the white Christian middle class in America, everyone loses. And it's much like slavery prior to the Civil War in America. And even Lincoln himself, who was originally from Kentucky, said that the one thing he remembered about slave states is that poor white families leave slave states because they couldn't afford to compete with the slave labor there. So they had to move elsewhere where they could compete and make a living. And so, again, it was a wage problem. Wages were being driven down low because you had these few plantation owners, just like you have these few bankers now today, driving the cost of goods down because they had free labor, basically. And it's very much the same thing with these banks now that run the world, run America. They exploit these countries, and now they're trying to exploit these people a second time by importing them into America to pay them low wages because they don't want to pay a living wage to American families. So I think the simple way to fix this is, yes, deport these people back to their countries and then pay them fairly for their products from their countries, whether that be fruit, sugar, lithium, whatever their country is producing. Pay them fair trade so that people can be banana farmers and not have to resort to cocaine. That being said, I'm not justifying the sale of cocaine under any circumstances because it's so deadly. But I think you see my point. This is the way we could help these people build their own countries back. And most Americans are not aware of the abuses that were executed after World War II. But that is why we're here today. These countries were exploited after World War II, driven into poverty, and now they're being brought here as, again, slave labor, really, because their wages are so low. But then at the same time, middle Americans are also being driven into poverty because there's no work. And the only people benefiting from this are a few at the top running the banks and that sort of thing. And then also, I think, rather than sending our military to the Middle East to clean up problems that Israel's causing over there, we should have our military go into these countries and help these countries regain control of their countries from the hands of these cartels and these mafias that run Latin America and make it such a dangerous place. So that's just some thoughts I had this morning listening to the Pope's words on YouTube. So if you have any thoughts on that, or if you have any questions or points of clarity you'd like me to make, perhaps in a future video, or just give me your thoughts and comments. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about today. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I think the Pope is right in his sentiment about taking care of the poor. And I think he's sincere in that, Pope Leo is. But I think the solution is not to empty Latin America and everyone comes here to work for slave labor, slave wages. I think the solution is that we deport these people back to their countries, get the banks off their backs so they can make a living, and possibly provide military aid to them, if we're going to provide aid at all, to help them squash the cartels and the mafias down there. And also we need to squash the banking cartels here in America and abroad so people can actually make a living. So thanks for watching The Heavens and the Earth. Those are my thoughts today. God bless. I'll see you next time. Thank you.